My experience has defined the way I move forward. My name is Arnoldo Rodriguez, and I am a follicular lymphoma survivor. Before cancer, I was an educator, teacher, school principal, administrator, and then moved on to the corporate world in supporting educators with solutions, in particularly for the English language learners. My first experience with cancer was in 2010 with prostate cancer, and I went to several doctors in my geographical location where I reside, McAllen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. And it became very evident to me that my doctors were not being advocates for my treatment. So, using my education background, I did some research into best practices, finding out which hospitals could help me with the most research-based evidence care available. So I came upon MD Anderson. At MD Anderson, they provided surgery, which was the best option for me at the time given my age, and they conducted a prostatectomy. And that had served me well for several years until 2019. I noticed certain symptoms that I knew were pointing to a particular problem. I started to have lumps in the back of my neck. I started to have some lumps under my armpit. I lost weight in a very short amount of time. I lost about 40 pounds. And I felt fatigued. So with that, I knew where the best cancer treatment was. I called MD Anderson and we set up appointments. They did scans, and it turned out that I was at a stage 3 follicular lymphoma. So they provided several options, and they were able to offer a clinical trial. They were able to provide me with a clinical trial that used proven strategies while testing new medication to bring about remission as soon as possible. So I did the treatment, several rounds of chemo. I did run into some issues because my immune system was severely compromised. So as a result, I contracted pneumonia as well as the coronavirus before the pandemic. So I had some issues where my abdomen quickly filled up with fluid. So with that, they had to drain that and being put in oxygen, because that was the only way I could breathe. So I spent several days at the hospital. So it was some very challenging times for me, but we made it through. At this point, the treatment was to go with 3 rounds of chemo, 2 rounds of aminatizumab, and 1 round of bendamustine. Later in 2020, I got to remission, so I was doing well. We looked at some options after having experienced 2 relapses with my lymphomas. One option was to change my treatment totally. Since the chemo didn't work, the doctors recommended a chemotherapy pill. It turns out that that was prohibitively expensive for me, and the insurance would not cover it. So we wrote to the insurance companies, and the best they could do was reduce it from $10,000 monthly to $2,000 monthly. As a matter of principle, I decided not to go that route and to appeal to my clinical team at MD Anderson to look for other options, which they did. They advised me that they were waiting approval for a clinical trial, and that I would be an excellent candidate, and once approved, I would be the first patient to be admitted. So 2 or 3 days later, my doctor called me and said, "We got approved, you're in." So we scheduled the date. I came back to MD Anderson and started the process to remove T cells to send to their lab. They genetically modified them. I went back home until they were ready to send them back to MD Anderson. Once ready, I came back to the hospital. Part of having to do a clinical is that you need to do an informed consent, which has many requirements. A major requirement for me was that I needed to stay within 2 miles of MD Anderson in case an emergency occurred. So having to find an apartment temporarily for a couple of months was a challenge, but the social work department sent a list of possible apartments that would do it at a low cost or free of charge for cancer patients. However, all of those were booked for several months. So yeah, we had to make the extra expense, but at the end of the day, it was all worth it because it saved my life. For me, the clinical trial was my lifeline to continuing to live a quality lifestyle. It is not a last resort. It's a lifeline. Clinical trials are based on proven strategy and trying new pharmaceuticals to go along with it. As a patient advocate for Latinos and all others, I would say do the clinical trial. The evidence right now showing that perhaps the clinical trial could become the standard of care for lymphoma patients. As a cancer patient advocate, in particularly for Latinos, where education about cancer care is important, I would like to use my platform as a survivor to not just share best practices for healthcare. I also want to help as many patients as possible. My experience has defined the way I move forward with supporting others and advocating for the best cancer care available.